Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello and welcome back to The Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thanks for joining me on this episode where I would like to talk a little bit about liturgical living. So if you listen to the Catechism Fridays episode that came out last week about Lent, I briefly went through what liturgical seasons are and alluded a little bit to liturgical living. But just as a brief recap, I can go through that a little bit, just so if you haven't listened to the episode, you should. It's less than 10 minutes, but I'll help you out a little bit in case you didn't. Okay, so liturgical seasons in the church calendar culminate on Easter. Easter is the focal point, the solemnity of solemnities, the great feast. It is the great mystery. Everything that we work towards as the faithful and the church culminates in Easter, right? Because Easter is the most important holiday. I know you think Christmas might be, but Easter really is the one that takes the cake, just barely, but it does, because this is the day that Jesus resurrected and therefore showed us that everything that he had taught was true. So if he was just a regular spiritual guru and was crucified and died, and they put him in a tomb and his body decayed just like a regular human, then Christianity really would not have been able to get the foothold that it did so early on and continued to do despite some really terrible persecution, because he would have just been a regular human and you could have easily taken or left anything that he had said. But because he did resurrect and defeat death, this is something that he foretold that he was going to do, and actually did it. So if he was able to do that, well, my goodness, we should probably pay attention to everything else that he taught. Excuse me. So Easter is very important for that reason. Also, it reveals to us our own destiny, which is to have this resurrected body after death. Right? There is eternal life for all of us. So Jesus establishes a new kind of miracle. The miracles that he did before were natural miracles. And C.S. Lewis does a great job of explaining all the different types of miracles in his book entitled Miracles. And this was actually one of the ones that was recommended by my husband in the last episode of 10 plus books that all Christians should read. So, all the other miracles that Jesus performed were more natural ones, so he turns water into wine. Well, humans do that, right? It just takes a lot longer for us to grow grapes, harvest the grapes, ferment the grapes, get the grapes ready to be drunk. So ferment the grapes, get the grapes ready to be drunk. So humans do that. It's a natural thing that we do. Well, Jesus took this natural thing that we do and condensed it into a split second. So those are natural miracles. The miracle of his resurrection is something different. It alludes to a different kind of miracle. The resurrected body, even though Jesus was able to, say, bring Lazarus back to life, Lazarus didn't come back in a resurrected body. It wasn't this new and different body. It was his old one, the same old one. So when Jesus resurrected, he showed us our own destiny should we follow in his path. So Easter really becomes the summit of the Catholic Christian year. So anything that happens throughout the year then is revolving around that. So whether it is then the ascension back into heaven, then we have all the ordinary time. Although a podcast guest a while back said she didn't like to call it ordinary time because we confront Jesus every time we go to Mass, and Jesus certainly isn't anything but ordinary. or is anything but ordinary. And then we get back into his birth, and we just go through the cycle of his life throughout the year. But it really comes down to Easter and the resurrection. So that is really what we're working towards, is cycling around that the greatest mystery and the greatest of his miracles. So the liturgical calendar that's what it's based off of. Now, if you go on Instagram and you follow a lot of there's so many wonderful Catholic bloggers who really focus on liturgical living. And you can see that they do these awesome things on Saints' Days and for Marian feast days throughout Advent or Lent. And they're wonderful. And I love it. And I actually follow a lot of it, and it's given me a lot of great ideas. But I want to backtrack on that, because that's all under liturgical living, right? You celebrate feast days and these other, Mary's Assumption or her Immaculate Conception, we celebrate all of it, and all these other specific times in the church, like upcoming Lent for 40 days. But if you really want to start off, if you're curious of how to start off with liturgical living, what you need to do is actually live through the church that Jesus founded when he resurrected. All of the rules and customs and everything that has come out of that comes from Jesus. Either things that he taught while he was alive, or through the people that he put into place before he went back to heaven. So look to see what those things are. That should be your number one thing. And it really just is so basic. And you can never outgrow the basics. You never outgrow fundamentals. You can just move more deeply into them. So what is a fundamental of a liturgical living practice? Well, one would be going to Mass every Sunday and on holy days of obligation. If you want to move more deeply into that, say you're already doing that without fail, well, awesome, that's great. Then start adding in a daily Mass, once a week if you can swing it. If you are curious, if you're not baptized Catholic, but this podcast and other resources have maybe encouraged you to start thinking about becoming a member of the church, then reach out to your parish and your local parish and talk about the RCIA process that they have. If you haven't been confirmed, I know my husband just was confirmed last year, even though he was raised Catholic for the first decade of his life, because by the time it came around to his confirmation, there was basketball practice and guitar lessons and other things just seemed more important and easier to do than take prep courses, or I think it was probably called CCD back then. And many adults, even now, are baptized Catholic, go to Mass, but aren't confirmed. So see what that confirmation process might be for you. Ask your local parish. If you're sensing, you're probably sensing a theme here. I'm asking you to move more deeply and make sure that you are taking advantage of the wonderful sacraments that Jesus gave us. Confession. You want to live liturgically? Go to confession. That means right there in the liturgy. You want to live liturgically? Go to confession. That means right there in the liturgy. Go to confession. It's going to help you move more deeply into your relationship with God. So if you're not doing these basic things already, there really isn't a point yet, I don't think, in adding extra stuff on that, while very informative and educational, and helps create a sense of joy and wonder and appreciation of all of the wonderful saints that have come through the Catholic tradition, the inspiring life of Mary. Don't add extra stuff on unless you're already doing the fundamentals really well. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water here. So if you want to start off on liturgical living, just start there. Start fresh, basic, get that. Go to confession. If you're not confirmed, do that. Get baptized if you're not baptized Catholic already. Confession, love it. I always love confession. I never understand why. It's a little nerve-wracking. I know people don't like it. I get a little nervous going to confession because, man, you have to say it out loud. Well, God already knows what you messed up on, and at least now you know that he's forgiven you. You hear those words of absolution, and it's really freeing and wonderful. So go to confession. Okay, but say you're doing all that stuff already. You're taking part in all the sacraments. You're going to Mass. You fast and abstain from meat on Fridays during Lent. Okay, let's talk about liturgical living past these fundamentals, because it's a lot of fun. So first off, we're about to start Lent, so let's talk about this a little bit. Basics of Lent, if you want to live liturgically during Lent, well, in the old church, well, probably around Vatican II, or maybe a little bit earlier than this. Maybe it wasn't switched. Maybe they didn't switch in Vatican after Vatican II. I'm not sure how long ago this was, but the whole church fasted and abstained from meat every day but Sundays. The reason being is that Sundays, when you count from Ash Wednesday to Easter, Sundays aren't included in that count. They just aren't. Sundays are mini Easters. So let's actually backtrack, because this is a great way to celebrate or get more involved in liturgical living pretty easily. So every Sunday is a mini Easter, right? It's the Lord's Day. We celebrate on that day his resurrection, even though it's not the resurrection that we celebrate in the same way on Easter. Easter is the big one. Every other Sunday is a mini Easter. So it's a Lord's Day, and it's a celebration. So say through Lent, Sundays were a day where you could relax the other, your other penances, and your fasting. So on Sundays, typically throughout the year, whether or not it's Lent, for liturgical living, this is a really easy one to kick off, I think, is to actually have a Sunday dinner. Growing up, I grew up in the South around a lot of Baptists, and Sunday dinner was always like a thing, and I never understood why. It seemed like, man, that's a lot of work for a Sunday evening, and you have to go to work or school the next day. I don't know, man. That just sounds like a little too much. I'd rather just relax on a Sunday. But what it winds up doing is creating a mini feast day, which it is because it's a mini Easter, and where you invite friends or family, or even it's just you and your small family throughout the week. But I know it can be difficult for a lot of people's schedules. But Sundays are a day to celebrate it a little differently. So Emily Stimson Chapman, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, has a book called The Catholic Table, and she really explained a nice way of celebrating these mini Easters on Sundays, and how it does play into, quite simply, into liturgical living, and doesn't really require much else, or too much extra. But it's really just, putting a nice tablecloth on the table, maybe pulling out some dishes that you don't normally use every day, maybe having nice napkins instead of just selective size paper towels, just sitting down, having a slower meal, maybe something that takes a little bit longer to prepare, and having a dessert. Always having a dessert on your Sundays, because it's a feast day. It's special. It's a mini Easter. Of course you would have a dessert on Easter. So having this nice mini Easter, of course you would have a dessert on Easter. So having this nice meal with your family in a slightly more special setting, whether that's, putting candles on the table or a nice tablecloth, and having a dessert, which you might not normally do after dinner as a family, that is liturgical living in a very simple way. It doesn't require a lot of, pinning stuff on Pinterest or printing things out or buying anything really extra. It is just creating a sense of celebration with what you have at home, and making that dinner slightly more special than the other nights of the week. So if you want to live liturgically, that's a really simple way of doing it. I've also found for myself, we have a lot of self-imposed dietary restrictions in our house, just for health reasons. But on Sundays, and I love to cook. I've always loved to cook. But on Sundays, and I love to cook. I've always loved to cook. And so I enjoy all the cooking that I do, all the very health conscious stuff that I do. But I do miss at times making very simple, home style meals that I just don't really want to make, just because, I don't know, they're too heavy or something to eat on a regular basis, but I love making them anyway. So that's what I do on Sundays. I bake cornbread from scratch, and this past weekend I made a peanut butter chocolate pie. It was amazing, and I would never make it. I had sweetened condensed milk in it. Like, I don't use that stuff normally, but on Sundays, anything goes. I make a dessert that we have a little slice of pie with the family, and it's special. It's different, and that's our treat day. And it's not like an all day treat fest. It is, and then a dessert, which I don't usually make. So it winds up being this, it has a special sense to it, even without that much extra work on my part, because I'm cooking every night of the week anyway. Just make it slightly more special, add a dessert in. So I've really been actually enjoying this switch to a very simple way of liturgical living. Okay, so you got your Sunday dinner, easy way to start to live liturgically if you'd like. Now, there's like a feast day every day of the year. The Catholic Church is just filled with awesome saints with great stories, and they have their own days every year, and you can celebrate them. So it would be impractical and impossible and overwhelming to try to celebrate all of them. My advice would be to pick a saint a month. So, I don't know. I think February is pretty easy. St. Valentine's Day. I think March is pretty easy because St. Patrick's Day. This year, Easter is in April, so April is just Easter. No extra saints on there. I'm trying to think. January was St. Agnes. So I look at the calendar of all the feast days for the saints, and I do some research and see which saint is really sticking out to me. And I see what I can do as a family. My kids are small enough that it's kind of easy to get activities and for them to get jazzed about it. As they get older, the teen years, my strategy might change. But for now, it is a simple craft or two, a story about the saint, a coloring page. I have this great saints coloring book that I won in a giveaway, actually. I use that for the kids. A lot of times, actually, the saints I pick are based off, they're in that saints coloring book that I have. And then I look at where that saint is from, and we make some kind of special dish that goes along with wherever that saint is from. So, St. Agnes was relatively simple because she's from Italy. So, I just tried to look at what the Roman cuisine might be, actual from the, Rome area. St. Patrick, I always make corned beef and cabbage and colcannon anyway, so that's pretty simply done. But it always revolves around something, it's not that overwhelming. Just picking one a month, seeing what saint really, really I'm drawn to, one that I'm interested in learning, then finding maybe one activity, a craft, and some kind of with it, and that coloring page if I'm able to, and then a special meal that goes along with that. And that's it. And it's once a month, and it doesn't feel overwhelming because I can do that, and it might, it does require some forethought, but it's not that much. It really isn't that much. You could pare that down and just have, say a prayer to that saint and talk to your family about that saint's lives, that saint's life while you sit down to dinner. It doesn't have to be a big thing, a Pinterest-worthy activity. It doesn't have to be that, but you can choose a saint a month as a good way to starting out with this. And just see what feels right, and you don't want to be overwhelmed to the point that you're over planning, and now you're not going to get any of it done. So that's just an easy way of liturgical living. So that's just an easy way of liturgical living. So you have your fundamentals, going to Mass, getting the Eucharist, going to confession, making sure you're confirmed, taking part in any of the other sacraments, celebrating mini Easters on Sundays, and then picking a saint a month and having some kind of celebration or activity that makes sense for you and your family. If it's St. Francis, I can't think of when his feast day is off the top of my head right now, but maybe you would volunteer at an animal shelter. It doesn't have to be a craft and a food thing. It can be whatever makes sense and whatever you guys find to be the most joyful and interesting, and you should vary it up. I think you should vary it, mix it up. Now, as far as the other, we have ordinary time for most. We have ordinary time for most of the year, and I did an episode a while back about how to celebrate Advent, which is a mini Lent. And then, I did the Catechism Friday last week about how to celebrate Lent. But since we are just about in the Lenten season, I would like to talk about how to celebrate Lent in a liturgical fashion now. So, as I said before, you used to have to fast. The church would make you fast every day but Sundays throughout Lent. Now it's just Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and then you abstain from meat and fast. And when we say fasting, it just means 2 light meals, meat-free, more like snacks, and then a meal at dinner, no meat. And then of course you'd give up something. Now you give up something. So chocolate or speaking ill of people. And then on Sundays, if you'd like, because those are mini Easters, if you picked a food penance of, something to sacrifice food wise, you can relax that a little bit on Sundays. So if you gave up chocolate, well, on Sundays you could have a small dessert with your family because you're having your big Sunday dinner and dessert afterwards, and that's totally fine. Now, if you gave up biting your nails or smoking or getting in fights with people and road rage, you wouldn't want to relax that on a Sunday. So then just use common sense there. But if you want to bring a sense of Lent to your whole house and not just a personal sacrifice, which it should be that as well as your fasting and increased almsgiving, you can make your house have a feeling of Lent, and also you can do this at Advent as well, because remember, Christmas doesn't start until Christmas. That's when the Christmas season starts. It doesn't start the day after Thanksgiving. So this works for both Lent and Advent in a sense. You can pare down the decorations in your house. If you have a lot of stuff on the walls, usually, you can actually take some stuff off the walls and make the walls more bare, make things look more simple. Because again, this is a quieter, penitential time where you don't want to be too flashy or joyful on Sundays, certainly. That's a mini Easter. But this is about penance. All right, so we are mimicking and aligning ourselves with the suffering that Jesus experienced in his 40 days in the desert and in defeating Satan in the desert, rebuffing Satan's advances in the desert. So that's what Lent is for. And it's not a joyful, happy time. Jesus went 40 days without food, and the angels needed to minister to him. He was in the wilderness alone, and he was tempted by the devil. So 40 days of Lent should have a similar feel of hardship. So maybe pare down what's in your house. Also, purple is the color of Lent. So maybe put a purple table runner on your table, or a purple tablecloth. Or since Jesus was in the desert, maybe have a cactus or some rocks or something that reminds you of his time in the desert. And actually, for any of these liturgical living ideas, those specific ideas about the purple tablecloth and the cactus and the rocks came from a great resource called Catholic All Year. That is a great resource. Also, as far as resources go, Katie Bogner's website, looktohimandberadiant.com, is wonderful. She is a Catholic school teacher and also a great creator of things. She creates these great PDFs and printouts that most of them are free. Some of them are in her shop. But I found, and she has this just great, insightful ideas, especially because she teaches older kids, like middle school age kids. So she has these great ideas for even as if you have slightly older kids than, say, my preschooler ones, of how to get them engaged in talking about the saints. And her website is amazing for that. And there's so many great resources. But the two that are coming to mind are Catholic All Year and Look to Him and Be Radiant.com. And that's what, Catholic All Year has a bundle right now, which I just bought and I haven't printed out yet, but it's like a Lenten countdown calendar that you can, cross off with your family. There's also prayers that you can do, just keeping things more simple and focused on the season, which is 40 days of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And it's not a super joyful time, and that's okay, because what it ends with is the biggest holiday, feast day of the whole year, Easter. So you get this lead up, and then suddenly Easter becomes even more powerful and more special, and you can feel it more in your bones and your soul when you take a simple household, pare down from extravagance and decorations and typical foods, and less of a focus on easy living that you've been doing for the past 40 days. And then suddenly, pow, you have the brightness of spring, of the Lamb, of Jesus. It really packs a very powerful punch, and it brings the resurrection home even more. So as we go into the Lenten season, see what you can do just to have visual reminders of the fact that this is a penitential time. The same thing goes for Advent. You can pare down what your house looks like during Advent, keep it simple, because remember, we have a wonderful celebration after that, which is Christmas. And you have at least 8 days of Christmas, the octave of Christmas. And we also have the octave of Easter. Easter really goes for 8 days. The whole Easter season goes till Pentecost. So it's a very joyful time after that. So you go the 40 days of penance, simplicity, and then you end with the best and biggest holiday within the Catholic Church. So, you know what? Actually, I saw a question, too, about what happens if you have something that you want to celebrate during Lent. How would you go about doing that? This year, it's helpful that St. Patrick's Day is actually on a Sunday, so it falls onto like a mini Easter anyway, and it's a day of celebration anyway. But that also brings to mind that if you have a birthday that falls on the fringes of Lent, then you might consider, or some other celebration, you might consider putting the celebration either before Lent starts or after Lent ends. Or if it's, smack dab in the middle of Lent, maybe celebrate it after you go to Saturday Vigil Mass or Sunday. So you've got some options there if you really wanted to stick to that penitential feel of Lent without, even though you have like something really great that you want to celebrate in the middle of it as well. So I hope that makes sense about how you can start to live more liturgically. Focus on the basics first. Don't add extra things in if you're not there yet. Focus on that stuff first. They're very important. Take part in those sacraments on a regular basis. Make sure you have that under your belt. You feel good about it. Then slowly start adding things in. Pick a saint a month. And as the years go by, maybe pick a different saint. So next January, maybe it won't be Saint Agnes that I pick. It'll be a different saint that I want to learn about. Or maybe your family will really love a tradition that you set, and you'll always want to celebrate Saint Agnes in January. Then that's your thing. You might look at confirmation saint names of the family to help dictate what saints you'll celebrate each month. And then look to how you can celebrate the big ones too, if you can fit them in. The Marian feast days are big, and then any of the more major saints that are founders of the church or really had an impact on the church as a whole, and again, ones that really have an impact on you and your family. If you have a patron saint of your family, maybe start seeing about how you can celebrate them. And it doesn't have to be a big celebration. It shouldn't be something that you stress out about and then therefore don't enjoy and don't do. The the beautiful thing about liturgical living, when you get into celebrating, say, feast days of saints or the Marian feast days, is that they're personal. Just as much as what penance you pick at Lent is personal, this is personal too, to you and your family. So you get to play around with it and have fun. Like I said, I do an activity or a craft, a coloring page, a story, and a special meal because I love cooking and crafting. So that is very easy for me. That's a simple way for me to do it. But also looking at other things, like I said, volunteering in an animal shelter for St. Francis or something like that. So, see what makes sense for your family and have fun with it, because that's the whole point. Don't get bogged down in the fact that it might not be Pinterest worthy or Instagram worthy. Just do what makes sense and enjoy it, but only do this after you have those fundamental sacraments under your belt. Okay. Well, so I hope this is helpful. I hope you have a very insightful and peaceful Lent season. Whatever your penance that you choose, I hope it brings you closer to God's suffering when he was in the desert. And I hope you are looking forward to the season of Easter afterwards, because I certainly am. And that's not just because we are getting 8 inches of snow right now outside. All right. So have a wonderful week. And don't forget to go to Mass on Ash Wednesday. Get your ashes. Even if you were not fully baptized or confirmed, anybody can get ashes. Doesn't matter. So go to Mass on Ash Wednesday.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.